with Mayor Watts on the phone, who, if I understand correct, Mayor, you're just not feeling well, but wanting to still participate.
Yep.
Okay. Well, then we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to begin tonight with a work meeting for the Special Community Development and Renewal Agency of Herriman City. The first item on the agenda is discussion of proposed participation agreement for the Herriman Innovation District project area. So Heather, we will turn it over to you.
Hello. So he really does have my PowerPoint this time. I did it correctly. So we met last meeting to talk about the two CDAs that are both going through the process. And now we are bringing back a participation agreement on the Herriman Innovation District. This is with Herriman Industrial. They are the builders of Bullfrog Spas. So just as a reminder, this is the 38 acres in the Herriman Innovation District. We discussed these numbers previously. It's a 15-year period. The increment remaining after our expenses is $7.1 million. That is with participation from all of our taxing entity partners. So the participation agreement with the Herriman Industrial, they're asking for reimbursements, as you can see here, for the Midas Creek storm drain improvements, Rocky Mountain Power mainline extension, Dominion Energy mainline extension, 118 south improvements, and then future 70-80 west improvements. Those reimbursements are given once we receive verification of the actual costs. So you have the participation agreement. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those. And we would like to bring this back in 2 weeks for a regular meeting if you're comfortable with that. All I have.
Just because we have a few of these in the works, did we still have anyone outstanding as far as signing off on their participation in this one?
So we do not have our approvals from the county or from UFSA. We're meeting with both of their staff to move those forward to their board and county council. But we do have approvals from all the other agencies. So with this reimbursement, the total is $1.2 million. With what we already have approved, even if they, for some reason, did not participate, we would have the mechanism to reimburse this participation agreement.
And so you're meeting with both of those entities to move that forward. Any indication on timeline of when they are looking to move that to their boards for approval?
The county, I spoke with their staff yesterday. They asked for a few more clarification points. They require you to give different scenarios of 25, 50, 75%. So we're writing that up currently, and we'll send that to their staff. And once they feel comfortable, then they get a recommendation from the mayor's office. Then the mayor's office has it scheduled.
What are we requesting? What?
We're requesting 75%.
75%.
From both of those entities, correct?
Yes.
How much of a difference will that make if it was at 25%?
So it was in my last meeting slide. I don't have it in front of me, but it seemed like it went from, it was probably $1 million, maybe two.
Closer to two. But that's your question, you might start with but again, when you're looking at that, it all depends on how fast it grows and what you build there too. So that's the original estimate.
Okay.
Something we're comfortable moving forward with without those other sign-ons?
Well, that's why I asked the question in terms of where we stand without those two approvals already being in place.
We cover.
And it's covered, yeah.
Yeah, we have enough funding from the other taxing entities to cover this agreement. And again, this agreement, they only get reimbursement if we get the money.
So Heather, what's your recommendation?
So I would recommend, if you don't have any questions as far as, what is outlined in the agreement, that we put it on in 2 weeks for those. Here's the chemicals. Thank you.
What's Herriman Industrial one?
So go to the next.
And I can say that Councilman Schultz, part of that is in 2 weeks we should have an update from by fire service or their administrator how he feels about it. He's ready to move forward before. So we paused because there's so much things going on in the fall, if you remember right, transitions of board members and everything else.
The other thing is any participation agreement or any interlocal we do with these agencies before December 31st would start with these anyhow, because we won't have any taxes, because you have to report by January 1st. If you don't, it goes to the next year, so.
Understood.
So we've got some time to work on it, even if we pass it, to get it done before the rest.
Got it. Yeah. I'm okay with that.
Okay, is there any other questions for, item 2.1 for our renewal agency meeting? Okay, seeing none, then we'll accept a motion to adjourn this one and, convene, and then we'll turn it over to Jared to call our other one.
You can keep going.
Nope. I do not
I'll make a
have the authority.
motion to adjourn the Community Development and Renewal Agency work meeting.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So we do have the mayor on the phone.
Okay.
He's not feeling well, so he's participating electronically tonight, so we're on to you and the regular city council work meeting.
Alright, so we'll convene our regular.
Congratulations.
Apologize for my tardiness for the Southwest Vision meeting in South Jordan City Hall, and I left at 4:30. So, should speak to some of our issues. Sorry, I forget, we're gonna read this preamble again. So to start out, just to remind everyone, work sessions are designed for the purpose of providing council members with the opportunity to study and discuss difficult issues, gather and analyze information, and clarify problems. During work sessions, the council may not make any decisions that bind the city. Though the public may attend the meeting for observational purposes, there is no public comment period during this time other than public hearings and the public comment portion of the meeting. Members of the public shall not participate in the meeting unless they are requested to present to the council by a member of the council. At times, the council may defer to a member of the public or attendee to make a comment on a specific item. Good?
Yep.
Alright. Any questions on this evening's agenda? Concerns, comments?
Nope.
Good?
Mhm.
Alright, 1.2, future agenda items. Anyone?
Trying to read.
You have the forecast agenda
Yeah.
that were emailed to you. If you have any questions to add to that, we'd really appreciate it.
I'll look through real quick.
Make sure
I'm none for now.
Okay.
We'll get through this meeting and then.
Well, I know the document that was emailed to you is 800 pages long, and I know you read it in about 30 minutes, right?
Listen,
Yeah.
I don't know about everybody else, but there's a lot on our plate. I'm good.
Yeah.
We don't add to it today.
And also we'll take an email of the request and we'll add it to the forecast agenda and put it in a timely manner.
Awesome. Moving on.
Just one quick thing, not that it's an agenda item, and I think Brett, you might be prepared under the city manager updates, and I know Sherry sent an email earlier today. I think obviously we need to have a discussion around our public gatherings, public meetings, those types of things in the environment that we're in right now, and I think Brett has that on there, so I'll defer to that, but I just wanted to make a comment that I think as a group, we need to, as a body, we need to look at that as we move forward.
We're gonna have your little update and try to, we already have some ideas what we'll do in this direction. You may want to add to it a little bit.
Okay.
Awesome. 1.3, LMD Hill status.
This
On
was,
agenda, huh?
right, this was
County
asked by
approved
council
it.
and put
Now
on
we have to
there.
deal with it.
So it's their discussion item to give us direction what you want us to do as per meetings that's been going on the last few weeks. How am I doing so far? It's not our agenda item, it was council request.
Well,
I
I
didn't ask
think-
for it to be on there, so I don't know.
I think obviously, as we discussed this, if I recall, as we discussed this last meeting, we were heading into the final votes, and I think it was, again, a little bit of just anticipating what was gonna happen there and for us to have a discussion of if that was going to influence or change or our thoughts on what has been what's happened out there moving forward from the standpoint of Herriman City, so.
Yeah, I mean, a referendum's been filed, that has to go through its process. um, and play out. I think that, regardless of the success or lack thereof with the referendum, I think there's still a potential to have, discussions and negotiations with the developer, to perhaps, make some adjustments. I think that Herriman still have a lot to offer, that would be beneficial to that developer, and in exchange for some of those, we might be able to impact the scope and shape of that development going forward. So, I think we should be open to having those conversations in whatever format and time frame they happen, but, outside of that, I don't really know what else to say.
Yeah.
We should continue to pursue any and all options we have open to us regarding the county, developer,
Well,
residents,
I
fully
think-
support referendum process, whether it's in our city or outside. There was comment made at the league meeting last week. Another elected official from another city said that we have a quote referendum, what did he call it? He didn't call it a problem, a referendum crisis. They're afraid of people not agreeing with their decisions, and these referendums are out of control. I totally disagree. I think it's a perfect check and balance on our elected leaders and whether they're representing people or not. So we had a successful one in our community a few years ago, ironically with the same developer, and I think we got a much better product out of it. So fully support the process and efforts that are going on. And what else we need to-
To your point, I think that it's, when councils aren't willing to listen to, engage with, and heed their voters, that's where you get these from. I mean, there was no equivocation from anybody that spoke about Lindsay Hills. There was almost universal opposition about it. I mean, I think the tax reform bill also had huge opposition in the face of the referendum. So I think it's just, cautionary tale. Listen to the voters, talk to them, engage with them, solve
Yes,
problems,
I mean,
negotiate, right?
There was an article in Utah Policy saying that the narrative or the feeling amongst voters is that our leaders aren't listening to us, right? With referendums, ballot initiatives, etc. So hopefully we all and other bodies take note and start to listen to people more and think about that decision-making process. But I don't know what else.
I'll just echo really what Steve said, and that is, I think that there is at least some encouragement that the developer at least has opened up for some conversation, involved people from responsible growth and those others, and I think those are all healthy regardless of if there's a referendum, moving forward or not. And just to your point, I think we continue to be open and willing to those conversations every chance we get, because I think, again, at the end of the day, those conversations are what lead to resolution and of concern by our constituents, by those around us, and usually result in, again, a better product if there's some refinement along the way. So just continue to be open to those.
So whether it's that area or the surrounding area, something is going to happen at some time, and
Absolutely.
it will affect us as much or more than any other communities. Absolutely, keep the doors open. Okay, good. Item 2.1, discussion regarding community compost bin. Heidi.
Yes. I have a PowerPoint. Okay, so if you would remember, a couple weeks ago, Miss Adams' class came. She had 2 members of her class come. They wrote letters to City Council saying that they were testing their freedom of speech and wanting to get involved in the community and requesting that we have a compost bin. So we've explored that idea, and I just wanted to give you some information about what composting is. And composting is basically taking organic material, decomposing it into a usable product, soil that you could put in your flower bed, your garden, things of that nature. It does, as they suggested in their letters, take some elimination from the landfills. We have, within our zoning code, it defines composting under soil production. And in our zoning code, it says that it can be done in zone A1 if you have an area of 50 acres or more, and zone M1. So if we wanted to look at a place where we could do that here within the city, we could do it at Butterfield Park. Butterfield Park is 60 acres. I've highlighted 2 circles up there, which are 2 potential locations you could place something similar to the picture in the top of the screen where you could put some bins. Composting is something that takes place over time, and so you have 5 ingredients. You have to have organic matter, which is carbon, you have to have oxygen, nitrogen, which is like a fertilizer, you have to have moisture, and then you have to have bacteria, and you have to have that recipe just right, and you have to mix it, and you have to mix it weekly, and you have to manage what goes in, and you have to make sure you don't have bad stuff that gets in there. You have to make sure you don't have, often you can put organic matter that comes from your kitchen waste or comes from, you can use poultry waste. You need to steer away from waste that comes from animals that eat meat, so you got to steer away from carnivores, stick to herbivores, and then you mix that all in, and it's a process that needs to be managed and maintained. And so I would suggest that if this is something you're interested in, it would require an employee to monitor it. And you need to monitor for, I think when you open up something like this to a community auction, you're going to have to monitor for illicit dumping, because if you have open a lot, you can educate your public, but there will be some dumping. I think that's why the landfill has a gate and has a gatekeeper, and so you need to monitor that, and that's why you need an employee. So I just have those figures up there, roughly what that employee would cost. Other options for composting are, you can go smaller scale, and you could maybe go to the community garden. That was brought up as an option. I think that would be a difficult option to manage. The community garden is a gated facility where only the members of the community garden can get in and out. And so who would this be open to? I'm not sure if the community garden themselves wanted to do it, or this would be a difficult solution to open up to the community wide. I'm just not sure how that would function very well. Other neighboring communities, Bluffdale, they pay $5.10 a month for curbside pickup. They're contracted with waste management. Draper says to their residents, take it to the Trans-Jordan landfill. Riverton doesn't have an option. They suggest you can get an additional garbage can. That's the only option they give. South Jordan, they don't have an option, and you can get an additional garbage can. West Jordan is partnered with the Trans-Jordan landfill, and they do seasonal curbside pickup. This just talks about another option that we could look into is educating our residents. You could sponsor a program where you teach about composting and how to do it, and encourage people to do it in their own backyards for their own gardens. And Salt Lake City has a program where you can purchase a tumbler, like I showed in a previous couple slides, at a cost. So the city doesn't make money from it, but it offers residents a less expensive way to get a tumbler in their yard to do this sort of thing in their own house. The other options people can use right away are, as I mentioned, similar to what other cities are doing. You can go to the Trans-Jordan landfill. You can go to the Salt Lake County dump. If you wanted to have it curbside pickup, you could work that out with Wasatch Front's Waste and Recycling District. It costs $114 for the year after a $60 startup fee. Do you guys have any questions? I went really quick because I know you have a long day ahead of you.
That's great.
Are you planning on chopping it?
You can do more presentations.
Are you planning on chopping it?
Chopping.
If you don't chop it, it's gonna take forever.
Right, yeah.
So, are you planning a chopper?
Well, you would have to, again, you'd have to have somebody manage it, and they're gonna have to turn it and till it weekly. They're gonna have to make sure it has to be at a certain temperature to kill all the bad bacteria and keep the good bacteria alive. So you gotta manage your temperature, you gotta put in the right amount of nitrogen, which is typically done as a fertilizer nitrogen, to make sure that that bacteria chemical decomposition is actually active and going. There is a smell component that if you're not doing it quite right, it gets a little smelly. And then once you have all this compost, what do you do with it? Do you give it back to the residents? Do you sell it back to the residents? It's a process that is somewhat involved. So, any other questions?
Are the, for our city using the green waste cans, is that green waste composted? Cause it can, or is it just
It
filling up
is
the landfill?
taken to the, I think it's taken, if I remember correctly, I think it's taken to the Jordan landfill, and they compost what they can, but they don't like to create too much compost. So whatever can't be composted that they can sell, they put back in their landfill, which isn't a negative. The landfill does need some composting organic material in the landfill so that then it can have its processes done correctly as well. So they have a good balance there that they're working
Our
on.
Jordan landfill actually has a membrane in it, and they manufacture and harvest methane gas on it. So they like the compost being on that part of the dump, because they produce methane gas, they sell it off.
You can buy it for
You're talking about
$15 a square yard, so it's about $30 for a full pickup load.
Got it. I think that was kind of my conclusion about it, is the scope and cost of doing it inside the city seems prohibitive compared to the fact that there are way more affordable, accessible options that are available for the city right now. I want to give credence to the letters that the children wrote. They made a compelling argument as to why this is a needed thing. And I mean, I appreciate the questions and bringing it to our attention. I don't know if there's more that we could do to promote that in our community, you know, using the green waste cans to keep that stuff as much as we can from filling up the landfill and use it productively. Maybe we could message that a little better, but I think we should encourage using those green waste cans, at least as far as Herriman is concerned.
I would agree more with the education portion of it, educate people on the options that we have. It's not our business, or that is their business, Transjordan, etc. But maybe I think a lot of people don't understand the option that's there for them. I did respond to, I copied all of you guys, I think I responded to Ms. Adams, and she requested that somebody come speak to her class, so I'm gonna go talk to them on the 25th, I believe. So I'll have this queued up and stats to give them. I think most of their questions are more on kind of the public process, like if you want to get something done, how do you go about this sort of thing, so it'd be good to kind of walk.
I think Heather's, Heidi decided she would like to go along with it.
Sounds good to me.
She loves educating people on outsourcing green, that's for sure.
It's just
At other age.
good cause, right? I mean, it's a good thing, and
And I love the one contrarian in there, not just
Oh, yeah.
but yeah, good reasons why it was
Yeah.
good. So if you haven't read, if you haven't read all these letters, read them.
they're really good.
I like the warning.
Good. Thank you, Heidi.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Okay, move on. 2.2 Public Improvement District Policy Discussion.
Okay, our bond attorney has recommended to us that before we even consider any public infrastructure districts, that we have a policy in place. And so this discussion is not regarding any specific project. It's only what is our policy and how will we address any PIDs that come to us with an application. Now, I put it in your packet, but if anyone needs a paper copy of it, I've got that. To me, as I read this policy, and like I say, this was a sample policy that we've adapted, that came from our bond policy. There's only a few things that I think that and maybe you saw more as you read it, but the way the process is designed is that, first of all, the development wanting a PID would come to us with a letter of intent. Okay? The recommendation is that we have a review committee that determines whether this is even something to bring to the council, if it fits our policy, whatever, how we go about evaluating it at that initial level before it comes to the council. And so my first item on my on what I think is we need to determine or have the council designate who they would think should be on this committee. Now, the original sample committee had finance, budget, police, and like 20 people. You know, I think that it's more that we ought to have from the council who they would designate to be on the initial review committee. So I think number one, that's what I would say is we need to identify what our initial review criteria would be.
I think we've topped out the number of committees.
Yeah, well, you know, the original proposal that they sent me would have just staff reviewing it at that level, going to the council, once everything in your policy is met. But, you know, I'm open to whatever you'd like to do. Secondly, is whether or not we want to assess a fee. Now, at the letter of intent level, I don't see where the city would have much expenditures. All we're gonna do is whoever's on this review committee would review it for adequacy as far as our policy. So I don't see much need there, but the question is whether or not we wanna address the fee at that point. Now, as you move further through this, the next step after you review the LOI and it comes to the council, gets their go-ahead, it's not ready to start a bid at that point, but it's the approval to move forward with the process at that point. And then there is a document that's created that specifies the rules for a specific bid. So you can have different rules, but generally we have a policy that says it will be in this range or something like that. But once you get to the point of creating the governing document, we're gonna have, I believe, a substantial amount of legal fees both on our side and their side to generate the governing document. So that's really where I think we need to have a fee. No one's done these around us yet, or they're just in the early stages, so we don't know what a standard fee would be. We don't even really know at this point how much legal cost it's going to be. So it may be we put something in there that we bill our actual fees or something, you know, but that's the next thing is we've got, are we gonna charge a fee for the LOI? Are we gonna charge a fee for the legal and all that it takes on our side to make sure that their governing document does what we want it to do? Okay, the next thing is what kind of a development do we want it to be? Now, I've written a simple description of what I think. However, and I did this based on what I've heard from your discussions. However, one item that I personally don't like being in there, but it could be. But, on page 4 at the top, Herriman City will only entertain a district for commercial, retail, consumer services, or civic amenities. Now, if you want to take retail out or any of those out, that would limit what kind of projects will get through the LOI and even be brought to you. So,
Is that something you can change later?
yeah, this is a policy that you would be setting, and you could change that even. You could reduce it even further on the governing document.
So that's something let's just say we're nervous to do anything like this because there's nothing to look at, there's no experience to reference.
Right.
We wanted to try to run one project, we could narrow the scope to that one thing and potentially widen it later.
Yes. Yeah, that's potential. Later on page 4 there in section B for number 2 would be what is the maximum amount of mill levy that we would be willing to allow. The state law allows 15 mil. Now, our policy can say we're not gonna approve anything more than 5 or 7 or 10 or 15 or whatever it is, up to 15, you can limit it to what you think makes sense for us. So, and then,
If, just for reference sake, I believe you said last time that the maximum property tax we can levy is 15.
Well, we can do more than that, but right now we're at 14.059. So if someone, a bid came in that wanted to do 15, the property tax on that particular piece of property would be 29.4059%, or mils.
So the maximum, maybe I misheard, the maximum is roughly the same as what our current
Yeah, so, yeah, the maximum on a PID would essentially double what a resident or a business in that particular PID would pay in total. So, you know, that's just over $14 per thousand if they're in a PID that takes the full mill rate. It would be $30 per thousand for property taxes. So that's something that we can do, that's a choice we have, and what we feel comfortable with. And last of all, under the original bill that was passed, Senate Bill 228, it allows a developer who's developing in a PID to essentially build the project themselves, with the only constraint being that they get an engineer to give them a statement that their estimate is reasonable. I am suggesting, and this is on page 7, number 9 at the top, that we put in our policy for a bid that they would be required to follow our approved city procurement policy. Now, all of you know that I'm not a big proponent of bids, but I think that we can take these particular items, put them how we want them, control it to where it's gonna be, how much it can be, and so to me, it makes it more palatable than allowing, no offense to developers who are here, to allow the process to completely be transferred to them rather than having any oversight by the city. So we really don't have oversight once they create the bid, except that they can't violate our policy or the governing document. So, you know, that's where our control comes. Because once they create a bid, their district board controls the tax levy, any debt and bonding that they do, and under what structure they do the improvements. So, in my reading of the policy, those are the key points that we need direction from you. And if we even want to create the policy, or we can say we're just not going to do it. But if we're going to create the policy, those are the key points I think that we need to get from the council as to where we go from here.
Personally, I don't want to do anything from here.
Okay.
Just have the information, we kind of know what we're dealing with, and we can deal with it when we need.
So I got a whole bunch of comments, questions.
Okay.
I don't have them in any order other than as I was going through it, I jotted notes down. One thing I did a little research on about your paragraph 2A4, what kind of developments would be considered for a bidding. The Bill 228 at the, I guess right at the paragraph 1A, it says it can be used for O&M. And so I think there is a, we didn't vet this out, but let's just say, I think there's an application in lieu of an HOA for that, that I think creates some more perpetuity rather than some instabilities that sometimes exist with HOAs. So there might be an issue there, but I also think that we would have to have a policy if there was a PID doing O&M, they can, you know, have additional charges in HOA to try and limit the impact.
That's mostly true. Here's the deal. You can't use the PID for property taxes for anything that's not gonna become public infrastructure. If it's not gonna be something donated to the city at the end of the construction, you can't use the property tax for it. Because this creates a general, revenue, or a general obligation on the property owner. So you can't use the property tax for O&M. but the bill does allow the district that's created by the PID to assess a fee that can be used for O&M. So,
Okay.
So that's, thank you.
Okay, just, I think there's a discussion to be had there, I don't think we need to do that tonight, but, the review of a licensed engineer for reasonableness, I would say that should be our city engineer.
well,
If we're gonna do that.
if we're gonna do the, you know,
Sorry, Blake, you want to put more in?
Well, I think that's where it kind of opens us up, and I think where the recommendation of Alan to have them follow our city procurement policy puts that protection in place, and so I really like that
Yeah.
as the fix to that, as far as saying, yeah, you can go out and have a licensed engineer review it, but when it comes to the actual building of the infrastructure, you gotta follow the same process we would in the city.
Yeah,
Inspections
I
and everything else.
Yeah.
applied for that, yeah.
that's one of my three biggest concerns with the PID is the fact that essentially when you create a PID, if you don't structure your policy and your governing document, you are giving the developer the ability to set the taxes, bond for future people, and build the infrastructure with only the oversight of a engineer's review. So those are the three things that, to me, are the biggest things we need to make sure we look at.
Well, and I think there's some of your other things there, like on page 4, number 2, it says, provision of and or contribution to needed regional and sub-regional infrastructure. Who's gonna identify what's needed?
Well, that comes from us in the governing document, and just to throw out an example, because I don't know if this is really gonna happen or not, but if you take the Olympia, it's been thrown out that they're gonna do a PID. Now, I don't know if that's completely 100% true, but it would be my thinking and my recommendation that if they're going to set a tax rate in Olympia Hills to cover the infrastructure, that whoever the governing body is that creates that governing document needs to put enough in that calculation to upgrade 118th, to upgrade Main Street, to upgrade 126th, because you're going to have to look at that development plus any improvements that are gonna be required by them. If we don't put that in governing documents, they only do their piece and we're responsible for all of the things leading up to it. So, you know, if you are not getting the things outside of that district that are what you're talking about, that's gotta be in the governing document. That's going to be part of the infrastructure that they're going to build with.
And we should assume that, our county's gonna fully vet that out and make sure that happens, right?
Well, we would hope.
Yeah.
But, you know, that should be part of it, particularly if that turns into a pit, because,
Yeah.
you know, you normally are looking at impact fees to make those improvements to auxiliary roads. If you're doing a PID and you're going out there and you're standing by yourself, you're not doing impact fees, then it's going to be on the city or whoever to make those improvements.
And another $40 million of impact that we have to cover, like investment, yeah, it's a ton. My question was, is there, should we have a prohibition that if this exists, that it can't be covered through by a CDA or other type of?
That is in the law, that you can only cover this infrastructure with one source.
Okay, got it.
So if we pay it for, if it's paid for with a PID, for whatever's paid for with the PID, we can't collect impact fees, we can't do a TIF. It's on its own. You're not allowed to have different sources to pay for the same improvements.
Okay. I have another question. I don't know if you have the answer to this. I'm really clear that we can regulate what this mill rate is, but what I'm not really clear on is what is the basis for the value that the mill rate is charged against? Is this assessed value by the county? Is this,
Yes.
appraised value? Is that,
It's assessed value
Okay.
by the
it wasn't clear in the documents I read, so.
It's assessed value, but the mill rate will apply to the taxable value. So on a residential, you're gonna assess this mill rate to 55% of the assessed value. If it's a business, commercial, it's 100% of the assessed value.
Okay. So I'm just going through,
Okay.
taking these off.
I'm okay with it.
One of the things about, it's talking about operating budgets for the district's first 3 years of existence. If we're gonna do this, I think that would have to be expanded until the repayment begins. If that's 5 years, then that needs to include a budget for 5 years, because,
And we can do that in a governing document. The only thing that we've got control over looking at those budgets though are, do they follow the governing document that we created? If they're following the governing document, that's really the only control we have over their budgets.
But to Steve's point, we can put language in that governing document
Yeah,
that would cover any gaps that are created,
you know, I guess.
if it is a longer.
I guess I would add that to the last item that I didn't put on what I'm doing, but one of the things that I'm concerned with the whole thing is that there's no reporting requirements particularly. And we can put what we want for reporting requirements. Now, again, if it's within the governing document, we don't have a lot of control over it, but we can get the report from. And using that, we can create notifications of what's going on.
got it. Last thing I'll bring up is just a question of, pros and cons of requiring, arm's length relationships between some of the parties that are involved, you know, the engineer, maybe the contractor, the developer. I think that can help mitigate chances for abuse and exploitation, but on the other hand, sometimes a developer has their own crews and stuff, which would save money.
Right.
They could do it less than a, retail cost, so, there's some pros and cons that we decided there, but, I'd like at least one aspect of that to be an arm's length thing, so that there's somebody not controlled by the developer, the board, or the contractor that has some input on whether or not this is reasonable and how it's being done.
And that is why I put the piece in that they would follow our procurement policy, because it seems strange to me that we would have to go to a bid to do those improvements, but they don't, you
Right.
know?
I agree.
It seems like if we don't do that, we are then, reducing the control from what it's required for us to do, so.
Yeah, I agree, so, okay, that's my comments, there's no,
Great questions.
man, there's a lot. The only thing I would say, the committee that approved it, if we were gonna do that, what would you think about having the community development community do that? Seems like that's got the key people in it we would want, and,
Cross that bridge when we get there.
I think it's great.
Okay.
I think it's,
but,
I think
these
it's
are
a
gonna come
natural
up,
fit.
I'm just throwing out some ideas,
No,
I
I
mean,
think
it's
it's
gonna,
a natural.
You know, there is an amendment to this bill that's in the current legislature. It really doesn't do much except that it takes away the requirement for public meetings before you set the tax rate and enter bonding. And I don't see that as a big issue, because when that all happens, you have a group of owners who signed on the dotted line to be part of that. So, you know, having a public meeting for it doesn't seem to make sense, and that's the only thing they're taking out of the bill in the current version.
and, look, I know that this is not something we really wanna enjoy having to get into this, but, we were presented with information that suggests this could become a more pressing decision, and I don't know, I think there's a little more good faith into trying to answer at least some of these questions or tackle some of these ideas at this point in this discussion, so that we can maybe be a little farther down the road if we find out that needs to be expedited, so.
I'll stay in the same spot I'm in until there's a reason to spend more staff time and effort, etc. This is good information, but until there's there's a reason to go down that road, I don't see any reason to.
Alan, would you mind, just as a follow-up for my own, I think, beneficial for all of us though, just a short email or paper as far as the things that you identified in those points that you made today that, so that I don't lose track of them again as I go back and review this document again in line with those recommendations that you made.
Be glad to.
Even what you view as pros and cons, you said you're not a proponent of them, what are the pitfalls that you see and?
Well, I think the biggest concern is, as far as I'm concerned, is that this is going to change the value of the land and what you can sell it for. As long, if there's, both sides have full knowledge of what this tax change is, that's gonna lower the price of the land. The bill, anticipates that because the developer's not paying impact fees, they're gonna sell the land cheaper, and I think they will if it's full knowledge that the tax rate is higher. So I think the big thing to me is, how does the end buyer, how does the second or the third buyer, or the fourth buyer be informed that they're going to be paying up to double the taxes? You know, that's my biggest concern, you know, and Jared mentioned it at the last meeting, you know, and the Automall people are here, they're interested in doing one. But, you know, it's gonna affect the price of the property. And so, will it be viable down the road? I guess that's something we need to look at, it's something they need to look at, so.
So any clear direction on what our next steps would be? Heard comments, but not a cohesive.
It sounds like there's, I don't wanna put words in Jared's mouth, but, you know, reluctance to engage in this too much unless there's a request to do so, right? I mean,
I think that
I
would
think
come
we've
in
done
some-
we've done the intellectual exercise, and we've had the conversation, but to actually start finalizing these decisions, to your point, should be the impetus to do so.
So you wanna formalize submittal of a request and then start putting the procedural policy together after that?
Yeah, maybe that's the point we
And
need
then you
to,
decide if you're gonna
We've
move
done
it.
a
letter
lot
of
of
intent.
legwork to find out information, et cetera, but to proceed from here without knowing
Okay.
what we'd be considering, I mean.
Does everybody feel that way? So
Well, and back to a point that Steve made earlier, I think obviously if we get a specific request for this, then that really helps to drive what the scope, at least of this initial one or first one is, and how we can tailor that governing document to meet the need of potentially this first request, and then we look at, again, if we need to broaden that later, but.
I mean,
the reason
If
we're trying
something
to be-
develops where there is something that's pressing, that we need to consider it and go through that process, but until there's that pressing need.
I understand if it's the first request, but after the last meeting, and Alan was actually spot on in his assessment, we gotta probably put some policies and procedures in place as a guideline. And then when the request comes in, we have a guideline to go off of how we dial into the real details. And you're wanting to see our request and then come up with procedure.
Well, if we're going to go down this road at all, that's where we need to be.
I mean, that's a big if.
so Larry, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Is it gonna be your intent to, do you have a reason to make a request that you wanna do one of these?
As of a recent meeting, the answer is yes.
Okay.
I'd say find out what the details of that are and what,
Can you stick around then? We can talk about that later.
I can if you'd like.
Okay. I'm curious.
Right.
I'm not saying I
That's-
don't want to,
that's a good
but
point.
I don't want to
Yeah, I
waste
get
more
it.
time and effort.
Other than I don't wanna have to go through it all over again.
It's just, as I'm figuring out, there's a lot of risk involved, and we don't have anything to base it on, there's no template. There's a lot of risk on our part, so to just put a policy together to have one, to me, doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
I think the other side of that though is if you don't have a policy in place, then if somebody is going to make a request, there's nothing there to, the book's wide open.
There's no launch point.
They're making a request for us to set up some policies so that they can make a
And we
request,
can
right?
get and
I
say,
mean,
is it worth it for us to do it? Is it something we wanna do?
well, I think to the point you said
I think to
earlier,
the point though-
we can make this a very narrow statute so that it our policies and procedures that we develop would only be applicable to one particular,
That's kind of where we're leaning, because
and I think we should at
me and
least,
Alan discussed this a lot, for months actually, most throughout the whole last year. We've not been a big fan, but when you look at the possibility of other requests coming for you, this is the one that probably makes the most sense. When you get into residential, people are not going to know there's taxes coming on their property.
yeah, it's a whole nother
And that's another,
can of worms,
so if you
yeah.
have a policy that's pretty stringent, how do you get approval? The next one might come in and say, look, I can't get past the first layer of that because
Right.
it gets pretty awful. And it sets that policy in place that that give us staff guidance to help you all out.
Well, and I think from a potential request side of things, if you don't give them some basis or some guideline for them to follow, I think it makes it very difficult for them to then in turn actually make a valid request.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's both sides to it for sure.
But we just,
I don't wanna, I think Jeremy makes a good point though, we don't wanna spend more time than it's necessary. There's a lot on our plates, there's a lot on staff plate, we don't wanna necessarily burden them with work and assignments that aren't necessary, but it sounds like it's gonna be necessary.
we're pretty
I'm
confident
just,
we're
I'm
gonna.
being careful, I mean, this is gonna,
Probably
we need to
wrong.
make a decision on this, it's gonna come up pretty fast, so. I
Well, I
think why
think-
it's on the agenda item, it makes sense for us to ask some of these questions and look at some of these things and at least, you know,
I think
Totally agree, it's just
Right.
hard, if you're asking to give me direction, to give you direction on what, I don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's why we,
What
as staff,
this
want some
specific
direction
thing?
on some policy, give us some guidelines, and let's try to have a conversation with them.
I would be in favor of continuing to lean forward in terms of what Alan has brought to us today, some of the recommendations, again, I wanna see those sent, out to us so that we can continue to evaluate those again against what we have in front of us and be able to provide again some additional feedback, but I think, to your point, I don't wanna put in a whole ton of extra work where it may or may not be necessary, but I think we've got the request coming, and we better be leaning forward
yeah,
on
so
that
let's.
to help give staff some
I
ability.
think to your point, right, so this is gonna be an issue that could affect sale of property that we
Mhm.
are invested in, and I think we should, you know, get some of those details, close door meeting and have that conversation, see, coming out of that, we might be able to come back and revisit this item and give you a little more clarity after we get that information, fair enough?
Right, I totally agree with you, I like this discussion because now we have a little bit of a guidance. I think we're kind of, I've seen the nods supporting what Alan's, rules and procedures kind of
That's a great
lays out.
place to start
It's
from,
great,
yeah.
it's a good launch point. Now, when that request comes in, we have a little bit of a guide, we'll update you through an email, and we get those nods, that's kind of gonna be our guideline, we can start working through the process before the next council meeting.
No, thanks for the comments, I wasn't thinking that far ahead. Thanks.
Sorry. Usually it would actually take staff longer to go through the process if we got an application first and we didn't have anything put in place. So if, you talked about staff time. Well, the other way would kind of be backwards. We'd kind of be working backwards if we got a submittal and then we're working backwards, and that takes longer and it's not efficient. So if we have somewhere to start, that's much more efficient in moving forward than
It's
just
hard for us to know where to start, if
being
we don't
wide
know where we're
open.
starting.
And I guess that's the question, Alan, so
it's
here's,
what you would consider.
could
what
we
you would
Set the
do
rules and
that you
guidelines.
guys
portion
should know
of
what
this
you want and
policy,
you don't.
like, could we just have the policy of up to letter of intent or
I think,
application?
I think-
spelled out is what makes sense.
right, I think our previous conversations give us a pretty good idea of where that initial starting point may be based on previous
Let's
conversations.
verify, let's have the conversation, let's verify what that looks like and
I think
kind of
you
what the
could do
request is,
that.
and let's see if we can figure out how to do that.
I think you could do that, but here would be the thing I'd say about that is, someone gives you a letter of intent, and it says they want 15 mils. But we haven't got to that point in the discussion because we're only doing up to the LOI. Does that meet our requirements, and do we bring it to the council then, or where are we at with that if we only do part of it? So,
Thanks for making it harder for us, I appreciate
Nope,
that.
that's-
That's more work,
But
alright.
that's a great point.
It is.
I mean, it really gets back to what we're talking
Alright,
about
you're
here.
gonna have to. keep
All I'm
this one
saying
these
is,
days.
let's have the conversation and know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
We'll use what he's submitted, we'll get those emails out to you, so you know what, his recommendations are. And I think as we've already flushed out among staff, we think it's a great launch point.
Okay, fair enough.
May I ask when that conversation would take place? Is it tonight?
Are we planning for a close tonight?
I guess we can, right? Yeah, I think we need to do that, so.
It's noticed.
It's noticed.
Yeah, you got nothing else to do tonight? You wanna stick around? Who knows how long this will take? Thanks, Larry, appreciate your patience.
Okay, 2.3, overview of proposed mountain range development agreement.
All right. I basically have the same presentation that I have for you in the regular meeting. You can go through as much or as little of this as you want, depending on where your questions are. I think the first thing in our, I don't think there's any questions about the Rosecrest MDA unless there is, just removing it from Rosecrest. Is there any specific questions? Fairly straightforward, that one
We're
is.
gonna run into the same issue we have with Wasatch.
Yeah, the units.
Yeah, we have an email from Mike Bradshaw about it, he's okay, he's not comfortable, he doesn't like it, but he's willing to sign this, he's not willing to sign one for, Wasatch Hills. He made that very clear in his email, we have it in your pack, should be in your packet.
Okay.
Should be in your
Fun
packet, by
meeting.
the way.
So why would we wanna sign this?
Why we, I don't know, but he's very clear, he's okay with this one, he's worried about giving up some of his rights. He has different methods of laying one MDA over other, and council had a discussion on that a long time ago. He didn't like the idea of one MDA being laid over on top of another.
No.
So that's the only way you fix it. It's either this way or that way.
And by approving this one tonight, that's how we do it from this one.
We remove it from Rosecrest.
We
You can
remove it and
do
put it into
nothing.
one, so we,
You can amend this one, or you can throw out and lay one over top, which you would not. Rosecrest would not like that.
But I think, if I'm right, is there a question about, is he retaining units and releasing this piece?
He didn't disclose, he just was not comfortable. Go ahead,
No,
Lynn.
he is selling them units with this piece. That's why he's
Got it,
feels fine
Understood.
with this one, because he is allocating them units on
Got it.
this piece.
perfect.
Whereas
Okay.
the other one he wasn't, so that's, yeah.
And,
So
and
he is
Was-
fine to move forward.
and amending that for-
Units
was,
going
but
out of
that was-
Rosecrest into the new,
To this
okay.
property.
His
Just wanna
fear,
make sure, we don't want the double unit here, yeah.
his fear in his email was if he signs this one, he'll get a precedence for Wasatch Hills to get their sign, and he says they're two separate different things. And we agree with him on that point.
And the units are equal
Yeah,
to
they
what
absolutely are.
what
He don't have a problem with this one,
MPA
but he does have
says,
a
right?
problem with the other one.
Or is he selling them 100 units, you know what I mean? Is he selling them equal to what their MPA is, like, what are they, 5 or 5.5?
I think it shows on there 3.5 to 5 on that piece.
So is the unit that he's gonna transfer the 5.5, or how many units is he selling?
That I don't know. I
I
don't know
know,
what he's, yeah.
there's a conversation, I'm just gonna ask, Steve, if you
That
can
was
clarify
supposed to be
something
spelled
for
out
me?
in the development agreement.
If I understand
The
correctly,
agreement
Hang on, we got a conversation with that here.
the sale of that piece to you does not come with the rights that are inherent in the Rosecrest MDA, is that correct?
I would be forfeiting all Rosecrest overlay rights.
Okay, so I wanna make sure, thank you.
But I would like that piece of information, I want to know if Rosecrest is losing the amount of units that's allocated to that chunk of property or not, or if they're just randomly saying a certain number.
Right.
Okay.
Let's try to avoid the issues that have happened.
Yeah.
With these agreements before, when you change it, let's change it right.
And I believe they're prepared to show us a density breakdown for what they're doing, but we haven't received that yet. So that's Rosecrest. Again, this is all it says right now, that we're just removing that property. But we can certainly add a number. Creek Ridge, there are a few different slides in this, so I printed them out for you. Based on our Community Development Committee meeting last week, we talked a little bit about where the 207 units would come from. So I just broke down the information for you a little bit, so I apologize for adding slides after the fact. It was a late discussion, so I just added a couple slides, so I've got a hard copy for you there, so. Again, this is the current plan with the 3 areas. The proposal is to remove the 270 from the total and not specify which area they come from. It's fairly straightforward. So just to show you again where they could potentially come from, I broke it down a little bit for you. So Area C is built, basically, right? They were approved for 117 there, they ended up building 104. So that one's done. Area B has a section north and south of Herriman Boulevard. The whole area was approved for 520 units. They built 116,
Let me just think. If I wanted to be sneaky, I'd say take 25 from there, or 50,
From where?
from that
The
area.
place it's already built.
It's already built.
That's a good point, John.
Well, they could take whatever they had left over.
And it's a nothing for them.
And still
They haven't
They
built them,
Yep.
and they disappear.
In just that one area, Area C.
I
They
think,
have,
I think we're all of the mind that we're going to specify in some.
but yeah, we could certainly specify that they can't be the leftover units from Area C.
Well, in the draft, I put area A. Right.
That's
Yeah,
apartment.
they have not yet agreed to that.
They have not agreed to
Right.
It's all multi-family.
So Area B, again, north and south, the south section has been built. So the remaining units all go on the north side, which is 404 units left for, I don't have a pointer that works, oops. Wow, how far did I go? So Area B has 404 units left on about 46 acres. So it leaves quite a bit of density for this area because they really did a little bit larger lots down here, they pushed more of it up here. So, just something to be aware of on that piece. Area A has 1,500 units, basically 1,515, which allows them to do 600 apartments in two different sections of 300, and then 915 units on the remaining 108 acres. None of that section has been approved, or built, final approval, so obviously those units are up for grabs, I guess, if that's what we're saying. If you remember, the apartments were required to be at least 600 feet away from Midas Creek, so that's what that 600-foot line is right there. The apartments have to be north of that line. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask you a question real quick, just while it's on here?
Mhm.
And this actually relates to Chief Carr's presentation that I was looking over. There were some hotspot areas of activity that are part of your report. I'm gonna ask a question kind of ahead of time. In those areas where there's some more activity, they seem to be correlated with areas of higher density. My question is there a greater per capita rate of problems, or is there just more problems there because there's more people there?
More problems because there's more people there.
There's not just a higher per capita, I just wanted to clarify that because that could make a difference in what decision we make, so.
You're taking all those houses that are spread out, putting them closer, so it'll show heat.
Right.
In that area.
Okay,
So,
I wasn't clear on this, I wanted to make sure, thank you.
As a quick sidebar, being in mind the relation of, I look at it as pressure, right? Population density in general is pressure, and if you have a proper mitigating infrastructure, true open space, et cetera, that disperses a little bit. I think I see that with the heat.
Yeah,
right, and depending on the type of crimes or traffic, whatever we're trying to show, and it all looks in that same area, right?
Yeah.
You got more traffic and more dense areas.
Accidents,
Everything. Everything correlates very closely in all of those maps, and we've seen that grow. And Councilman Henderson will remember from years ago, we've showed these heat maps, they stayed fairly consistent throughout the years in those areas. So.
And I think there's a false notion that somehow it brings crime or problems or something. It doesn't, it just concentrates where it happens, yeah.
Right, and if I had mine up, and we'll see it later today, we'll see the little gray spots throughout quarter-acre lots, half-acre, third-acre lots spread out quite a bit, right? Then we were to take all those houses and shove them together on 1 acre, all that comes together.
And create a heat point, right?
Got it. And traffic goes along with that, right? Everybody getting into that very small space.
Yeah.
Herriman High is a great example of that.
Right.
Because twice a day we have mayhem. In and out of the school. So, but we'll go through that more.
Sorry,
No, you're fine,
I I think
Good
it's relevant
question.
to this conversation.
Yeah. And I think depending on who ends up buying Area A, could depend on whether they decided to do actual apartments or condos or something, a different kind of type of product it could be. So again, just looking at what's on Area B here that's left over, like I said, it's gonna be, between 8 and 9 units per acre is what's left there. I just wanted to show you an example of kind of what that looks like. So this is Mountain Heights, just up on Rose Crest and Juniper Crest. This is the Holiday Oil, Mountain Heights, and these lots average about 3,900 square feet, and it's about, 8.5 units per acre. So that's kind of what that would look like in there. So you can see how if we removed 100 of those units from that area, it would make a tremendous difference, in that area, and no open space in there either, so. So it's up to you. I don't know that it really is gonna matter if it comes from that area of B or A. I think it helps either way. But that's something you guys will have to look at. So I think that's all the numbers we kind of talked about, so I just wanted to get you those numbers.
In that committee meeting, we also discussed you guys maybe giving us a suggestion of a portion coming from each.
Yeah, and I looked at it a little bit, and I did, when I looked at it, I looked at taking 120 out of here, and this got this down to more like, instead of 8 units per acre, closer to like 6 units per acre, and then taking the other 150 out of the top. Again, I don't know what the applicant is gonna be open to or whatever, obviously, but, that'll be, kind of up to you to look at. But I think this gives you an idea with all these numbers, we can kind of play with the densities and see what, like we talked about, removing apartments, if you remove one section of those apartments, that's 15 acres. But if you remove 200 townhomes, you're affecting a lot more property that it could potentially open up, so.
I wanna make sure this area C is behind your house, right?
Yeah.
But to your point, I think anytime you reduce units anywhere,
Yeah.
it's going to have a residual effect. Now, you may
Yeah.
have a preference that it come out of something that's a little higher dense than from one product to the other.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have that reduction overall, there's still a gain there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we were making
Uh-huh.
the idea of if there's, if you reduce single-family residence, that has a bigger impact on traffic than if it was an apartment would be
Not
mitigated, right?
necessarily.
We're talking about, there
Well,
were more
single family has
traffic
more trips per day.
more trips per day
Yeah.
for a single-family unit versus an apartment, so.
But apartments have more concentrated area and you end up with a higher overall volume.
Water uses.
So the, kind of where I was going in that discussion, for those of you that weren't there, the community, being devil's advocate, the first thing that came up, when this first came up nearly a year ago was, well, geez, let's require it to come out of A and get rid of one of those apartment buildings, right? Well, yeah, we could do that, but then we just end up with a sea of townhomes, right? So we show some of those maps, etc. So the question was, would it be better for us to require that a certain number come out of whatever sections to balance that out a little bit, to help kind of spread it out over all of those areas rather than pick one particular.
And I really think that's why you would want it out of both. I think if you took 100 or so out of this bottom area, these become more livable single family. I mean, honestly, 9 units per acre, townhomes would be better. You'd end up with a lot more open space than 3,000 square foot lots, right? And if you take another 150 out of up here, you probably would end up with some single family up here, which I don't think we anticipated. You'd still have the apartments and some townhomes, but I think you could also have some single family as well. So I definitely think it helps to break it up, no matter where you take it out of, so.
But I would say we don't want to just leave it open.
No.
We would want to
Specify whether it's 50-50 or however you wanna do it.
Mr. Henderson.
I have one little comment.
Well, let's wait for the public meeting. So I have a whole bunch more comments and things, but I think we'll have a big discussion about tonight. Okay. About that later.
Cody, can you? Sorry, I'm just blind. It's like right there.
So bright.
Again, we've got the 3 applications. We can go through this as much or as little as you want.
Yeah.
I would just say things have obviously changed since planning commission. So what the planning commission recommended was based on the swap with the school district, which, after the discussions and everything, the applicant has revised their plan and we're no longer kind of considering that swap right now. So the recommendations from the planning commission are based on the old plan, with the commercial, which is not what's being shown anymore. So again, I can go through all this in here. This is just the process we've gone through for the general plan, all of the times that we have talked about it. And basically what they're asking for, which is, again, as we're all aware, the commercial and low density is what's existing, and they would be asking for medium density over the whole property. On the general plan portion. On the zoning portion, same thing, it's already zoned R210 on the bottom, on the Rosecrest piece. So they would be asking to rezone the top from A1 to R210. And then on the PUD overlay, includes basically the site plan, the design guidelines, and all like the amenities. This is the plan that the planning commission saw. So their recommendation, their recommendation was to do commercial on this entire upper portion. It's about 14 acres, based on this plan that they saw. So, and we can go through to the new plan. So again, on the general plan, this is what the planning commission recommended, was to change the general plan on roughly this piece, leaving out that northern portion to leave it as commercial on the general plan. Again, that's the plan the planning commission saw. This is the revised plan that you have in your packet. The applicant sent this new plan an hour ago. And I have hard copies for you if you would like them.
So I'm confused because I thought if it's not on, didn't think we could revise it before, unless we have opportunity to look at it before this meeting.
Yes, yes. So they just barely submitted this based on some conversations, for adding additional park space on that corner. And we didn't anticipate you making a decision on this tonight. We anticipated probably being continued for further discussion, so we just wanted to show you the new plan to get it in front of you, so you'd have a chance to see what was done. The number of units is the same. Again, they just increased the size of that park on that corner.
Then I'm back to the question of why is this on our general meeting conversation if we're just barely seeing this plan right now?
Right, so one of the basic tenets of that policy was so the public knew what was gonna be on there, so they'd be here for the said public hearing.
So when we get this plan, our plan were already given, PowerPoint was already put together. That was when in your packet we could go.
Sure, understood that.
Because this just came now, we can't pull it off the agenda unless it's by your guideline to do that, or the developers at this point.
Is the agenda
You
the
need to
notice and
consider
out?
what was proposed.
Then you can't consider this.
You can't.
No.
That's what she just said. You can have a discussion in this direction, you just don't see this passing tonight at all.
So the idea being, we can conceivably take action on what was presented, but we can't take action on this.
What do you have in your public hearing? What do people notice for?
So I would say it two different ways. Yes, you could legally take action on this
I
plan
don't think
tonight,
there is a public hearing.
but no, there's not a public hearing. There's no public hearing required in council.
That sheet that had all the dates, it's had its
It's
process.
Through planning commission.
On what was submitted, what was in your packet.
We
not
do have an
this one.
opportunity to comment in the public comment portion.
So you could make a decision based on any changes you want to the plan, whether perception-wise, whether that should be done or not, is obviously is a different question, but you legally could. Again, my assumption was based on the conversations that we had in the last week or so, that you were likely just gonna have a discussion and continue it and not approve it at the first meeting, or make a decision at the first meeting, so I just wanted to get this plan in front of you, so that you knew that they had looked at making some changes that had been talked about.
I guess my point is saying, and this could be a message to all developers working with this, is that we have a snippet of time to look at this information before we're asked to make a decision about it. So I'd ask that at least that little snippet of time be more than during our work meeting here,
It's just simply, if you're ready to present something, don't make changes while we're sitting at the work meeting. That's my request, because it
That's the whole
doesn't give
purpose of
me
a
an
policy.
opportunity to vet any of this out and make responsible decisions.
So I don't wanna belabor the point, but maybe we need to go back and talk about that policy, because this is the reason we set that policy.
Right.
If it's gonna change,
Well, listen,
then we take it off the agenda.
I think there's a reasonableness here too. If somebody's making a last minute change, I'd say it prevents us from taking action on it. Like, it no longer becomes an actionable item if they're submitting stuff after the agenda's set. I mean, we just can't do it. Public didn't have enough time to review, we didn't have enough time to review it. If this is for discussion purposes and there's no action gonna be taken, I'm not necessarily think it's a terrible thing. But it's definitely not something, oh, we like this, let's approve this. I mean, that's not fair to the public, it's not fair to our process either, right? So,
My
I mean,
extreme frustration is this is exactly what we're talking about.
And if you come prepared, it expedites the process. We get pushback all the time. Why are you taking so long? Just submit what you want approved at the get-go, and then we have an opportunity to move through the process. But we have to continue to revisit and relook. Now we have to understand, does this fall in really well with the MBA? What is the language in there supportive of this? All those kinds of things have to be answered, and it's just, our package was 500 pages, right? And we get it late Thursday night.
These might be good changes.
Yeah.
Well, to Steve's point, I think it does make it inactionable for a word at this particular meeting because we have changes. But I think like any plan, not saying that this is the right, I guess, way to go about it, because any plan can have changes that make it
Sure.
better over time. And
we could articulate changes to
Right.
it, right? We could manage
right,
it,
and we can actually make those changes as part of a motion.
Right.
Before we adopt something, so it's not like changes absolutely can't be made to a certain plan, because we have that option as part of the approval. I believe it makes it inactionable on this
Yeah,
particular night. However, they've obviously made a change for whatever reason. At least tonight we get to have that, at least allow them the opportunity to explain the change, knowing full well that there's not gonna be action on it tonight. To Brett's point, once, obviously, we have a policy, can't change an agenda once it's gone out.
Let me distinguish it this way
Yeah,
for you, Clint. This is not a late addition to this meeting, this is an early addition to next meeting.
Yeah, other
We spent so much time working on policy and procedure, so much pomp and circumstance on policy and procedure.
I'm not disagreeing, but what I'm saying is that obviously we were going to see this change anyways.
Yeah, but other than it would just be, instead of having to deal with it in this meeting and the next meeting, we just deal with it in this meeting, understand it, and then it goes on our agenda for the next time for an action, versus have to talk about it here and there.
I don't disagree with you, all I'm saying is that it's been given to planning. I think Brent articulated it well. I'm just getting it in your hands so you know what's coming.
I totally
Period.
understand that part, but that's my frustration, is like, now we have to
Don't
listen to
disagree.
the presentation through both meetings,
That's
and
That's legitimately why we had the idea, is to try and limit
But-
the amount of time that staff has to keep
Right.
on it, we have to keep on it, I get it.
But again, I'm not trying to belabor the point either, but at the same point, Brent shouldn't sit here and give us a presentation that she knows
I
has
agree,
changed.
for sure, I totally agree with that, in
So-
the work meeting, I totally get
Yeah.
that. But then we have to do it again in the general
Yep.
meeting, it's like, this
Yep.
is, everybody spending a lot of time for nothing.
So I say we
So that
move
mean
on
that-
from
so
this
that
one
mean
to
that-
the next one.
So does that mean that the next one is the first time we're considering it?
Good
Right,
question.
policy and procedure, I mean, that's, like I said, for the public that wants to comment on it, like that's,
Okay.
it's not just us,
Right.
it's for them as well. So I get it, this is just handed to you.
I mean, this-
We can talk about
but
it, et
This
cetera.
doesn't look substantially different than
I had three
packet, I
calls
mean-
today, is this something you guys are gonna decide on tonight?
Yeah.
No, because we don't do it on, our standing practices, we don't do it on the first one tonight. Well, this is a way to circumvent that.
I wanna be careful saying that our standard practice is, because there's been a lot of items that we have approved on the first time it's been on the agenda. So I think we certainly have that option as a body to take the time that we need to not approve it the first time we see it, but I don't wanna say that our standard practice is, because we can go back and give countless examples of things that we've approved on the first time. So I think what we need to say is that we're going to be as deliberate as we need to be in going through this. And I think we're gonna,
And you can't sit there and preach to us policy and procedure.
What do you mean?
You've made a big deal about that recently, about these very things, and now it's okay for this instance. Like, if we're gonna stick to policy and procedure,
Okay,
we need to do it.
my talking about policy and procedure was, don't twist it, was not directed at this type of a thing. It was about our internal council policies and procedures. It wasn't about this. I don't want that to be.
It's only certain policies and procedures.
Jared, don't twist my words, please.
It's frustrating.
I get it, but don't try and twist the words and try and say that
I'm
that
helping
this,
you understand.
that
I'm
this
not trying to
is
twist
because
anything.
of me. It's not. I'm saying plans change. We make changes on the fly on approvals. We do approvals on things that come the first time before us. It is not it's not a policy. It can be a procedure that we don't approve it on the first, but I don't think it's genuine to say that we automatically don't approve things on the first time, because we have done that time and time again on lots of things. I'm saying we have the ability as a council to be as deliberate as we need to. And we're gonna see changes, and that's part of the process, and the applicant is going to have changes and refinements. Again, yes, it should have been in the packet. Next week, you can say it's your first time viewing it or not, but the fact of the matter is you go back to a timeline, this has been an evolving project for 9 months now.
But this is the first time today that we've seen the project.
But again,
Well,
to
let me ask you a
Stephen's point,
question. Because it begs a follow-up question to this, Glenn. Here's the thing. If we were to look at we're going to be looking at what was presented. It's on the agenda for us tonight to look at what has already been presented. It's in there.
Discussion.
Public's gonna have an input, public's gonna look at it. If we in that meeting were to look at it and say, we would like you to make some other changes, and the public input comes back and they suggest some changes, and we discuss changes to that, does 2 weeks later become the first time we've seen the changes? And then we have to go another 2 weeks after that before we can make a decision?
In my opinion,
That doesn't necessarily logically make sense to me.
I agree.
So I'm not necessarily understanding why there's I mean, look, they're not like, what, one corner got changed? It looks like a slip.
Well,
of the
the
jacket.
corner got changed, well, the whole corner got changed for the planning commission, that was all supposed to be commercial. So it's a whole lot more than one corner got changed.
And they could.
One corner got
we're
changed
talking
from
about
what was
what's
on
in
the
the
agenda
packet. We're
tonight,
talking about
right?
what's in the
Come
packet,
on,
what was
I mean,
noticed and what's right now.
And they could be good changes, but as I said, we've spent so much time on policy and procedure. It's a public discussion. And even if and at first glance it looks like a fairly positive change. However,
So
I feel
would
several
you
calls
feel
today.
different about this if this was in the public meeting and the applicant comes up to make his presentation in the public meeting and says, I have one thing that I would like you to consider, and take your time to consider it, but here's a change I would like to propose to this. And is that a problem
How many
for an
changes are in
applicant?
the MDA? A lot, right?
Yeah.
And so anytime you make changes to this, it has potential impact to a very legal binding document.
Absolutely.
And we have been burned a billion times on MDAs. And I will not ever make a change on something that has some sort of changes to the MDA while I'm sitting at the bench in there. Never, because it's irresponsible.
Sure, I think I'm agreeing with you.
And that's.
If there's a change, like if we have a packet and there's a
Mm-hmm.
change made to that packet in our general meeting, it's gone. We will not approve that thing no matter what. We cannot approve it until the next meeting based on our procedures. I'm just not sure that there's a huge problem with presenting the change, other than we're all in agreement. That just killed any decision we can make on approving it tonight, right? I mean, I don't think there's a circumvention of any policy. I don't think anybody's trying to get one over on us or sneak one by.
I just think that.
Because if you do this, you're delaying yourself 2 more weeks at least,
Yeah,
right?
I just think that it's important to understand, I do believe that anytime there's a big decision, and this has several, this has a development agreement, which are very, very impactful.
Right.
It has a master plan change, which is impactful. It has a large zoning change, which is impactful. I don't think ever that that should come before us, and we have, the first time that our public has ever, in a public meeting in there, seen that, I don't think we should ever be making a decision that night on those types of things.
Don't
If there's
disagree.
something
I'm in
simple,
agreement
it's
with you
like,
too.
we need to change the language on this from Salt Lake County Animal Services to Herriman City Animal Service. Okay, I could see that that change could be made that night, we could take action on that. But anything that's very impactful like this, I don't think we should
I
be
agree with you 100%.
making decisions on the same night as
I
presented.
agree 100%.
That's my.
99%. If all the public came in and said, "Woo, this is the best thing we've ever heard, please approve this," well, okay, maybe, but
So I agree with
we'll
that.
leave that one little.
I totally agree with that principle. What's frustrating is, so now we're looking at this and considering this in our work meeting, what's going to be presented in the June meeting?
Well, the applicant will have a chance to present in the public meeting, and we'll now say, we've made some refinements to the plan, and that's their option to do that. Again, to the point is it's the first time that we've seen it, we're not gonna take action on it. And I think the developer will clearly understand, so we're not gonna take action on something that has a change that we haven't seen.
And I think, but this is a good precedent, to your point, it kind of sends a message out to everybody else. If you're making last minute changes, you're gonna face delays on that, right? That's gonna immediately, I think it almost binds us as a council from being able to make a decision. Like, I definitely can't approve it, let's put it that way. It's not actionable, we can continue it, we can deny it, but we definitely can't approve it. Is that,
Agree
I mean, are we
with
agreeing?
that principle. Good, move on.
Only
get
I
you.
wanna say about process and procedure is this, we've been refining our process and procedure. I just talked to Nurse City earlier this afternoon. I was telling them the process and what requirements council's put on staff to, what has to be in the packet. And they looked at me, wow. You mean your council's doing 500 and 800 page packets? Yes, because they went, presentation, they went, wow, that's taking a lot of your time. Yes, it is. That's why when you said late Thursday night, because she was here again late Thursday night,
Yeah,
make
not
sure.
faulting you at all.
Yeah, making sure everything's in there, because we wanna say 7 days in advance, you'll have your packet and it'll be full. So, we have listened to you, and we're going way above and beyond what other cities are doing. That's fine, it's actually perfectly fine for me, because you don't wanna know why? Because everything's out there for the public.
Yeah.
When there's a slight change like this, which it is slight, we agree with you staff-wise, it should be tabled.
Yeah.
You know, talk about it, but table it until next, for a future vote.
I have to interrupt you because that
Oh,
was
it's fine.
not directed at you at all. It's
I
like,
thought-
when I see what has to come out, what you
I got-
have
I got-
together and put together,
Yeah.
totally
Yeah.
respect that and understand that. My point was to try and help other people understand that once we get that, we have 500 pages that we have to review, understand, and feel good about approving or not approving, and until I have time to properly vet that, I can't do it.
And to your
While some of
point,
you may have
the
been
correlation of that change to this part of the MDA to this, right, like, it's complicated.
Yeah.
And one little change could have a ripple effect that we
Yeah.
have to have the time to go
having,
through.
well, it sounds like some of you may have been having side conversations. This is the first time I've seen this plan. That was supposedly submitted February 13th.
Right, that's
It's in the
packet.
Yeah, no,
But the
that's what I mean, in the packet.
first time I saw it was in the packet.
Yeah, me too.
So, I mean, that's agree in principle, we can talk about our communication, I guess, about those later. Sorry, Brent.
No, that's okay, I'm enjoying it.
Wait,
On that, we do release that packet Thursday. State statute requires 24 hours.
Right.
So some councils are getting this information the day before.
Yeah, and I just simply don't see that you
I
can
don't
possibly
understand
make good decisions on that. How can you read 500 pages in a night and feel like you really thoroughly vetted it and understand it?
I was gonna.
I think the short answer is just what
Read your book, just read your book every week.
I think so, right?
Whatever.
Yeah, it's huge, and look up, there's a lot to go through. I read the whole damn thing twice. I mean, I went through this, I read all of these minutia paragraphs and definitions and it was mind-numbing.
No offense to anyone that wrote those paragraphs.
Sorry.
Good job, John.
Yeah, thanks, John.
I got you back, Steve.
I mean, it's a lot to go through, and it is intricate, and it is detailed, and there's this, you know, in here it references this exhibit, and you have to go check that piece out, and how that references to other pieces, and I don't like having to go back and do this all again. To Jared's point, it makes a lot more sense to have a complete packet, ready to go, 100%, here's what I want you to say yes or no to. And then if we have an objection or we do something, it, you know, then we can move on from there. I think that what has generally been the case is that there's been this, you know, and I spoke about this 2 weeks ago, is that this idea of trying to garner a definitive vote with members of the council before it comes before the council, almost like wanting to hedge or hey, I want you to buy in on this thing and use that as leverage on other council members and stuff like that. And I think that our point is we wanted to try and prohibit that kind of a thing from happening, to say, bring it so that as a council we can look at it, discuss it, deliberate it together, ask questions of each other, ask questions of the applicant, really chew on it so that our process of making a decision is robust. Does that make sense? And it's not shortchanged, like Sherry's saying, but we have a chance to really vet all that out. So I can appreciate Jared's frustration, and I understand your point. I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know if it's the hill to die on, right?
That's frustration. It's not the hill to die on.
Yeah.
That's why I'm trying to move on.
Yeah.
It is frustrating, and I agree with the principle that anything new submitted, doesn't get voted on that night.
Yeah.
We can talk about anything else we want to.
I don't know where to go from here. Let me. Yeah, so the PUD, let's just briefly go through the PUD again. This is the plan the planning commission saw. This is the plan that was in your packet, which is all we're gonna talk about. It does have, the required open space, 625 units. No condos, as was in, you know, the original plans. The large park here, and it does show the trail and the storm drain all the way up through Riverton. This just zooms in a little bit, shows you the single family, the park, and then the townhomes on that side. And we'll just skip right over that one. There, you have the design guidelines in your packet. I just put 3 or 4 pages in here just to go through what they've got. They have the setbacks for the townhomes and the single family, minimum home size, parking requirements. They will meet our current parking requirements. Can't build the same house next door to each other or across the street from each other. They have a lot of design features, you know, finishing off the corners, roof pitches. This shows you some of the lot sizes. The lots in here are a good mix, I think, as far as mixing up the sizes. They range from, I don't know, 7s, 8s, up to, there's some 13,000 square foot lots in there, so there's kind of a mix on the single family. Public versus private roads, so you can see what the city will be maintaining versus the private alleys and roads that their HOA will be maintaining. The slip roads, again, a cross section you guys have seen before, just to show what that looks like, what the alleys would look like. Park strips, all the open space. And you will notice, because I triple checked with them, they're not counting any of this as open space. Our favorite little, you know, area between the driveway. What's in green is what you're getting as open space. That's what's counting as open space. And again, all of their building elevations are in your packet. This is just a few of them to show you what some of the products look like. And then the development agreement. John can certainly answer any questions. You've got it in your packet. Again, you've seen drafts. The biggest changes in this were switching out the swap with the school district property. So, density of 625. Limiting the Riverton portion of the property to 7.5 units per acre is what's in the current agreement.
From a legal point of view, how can we limit what happens in another city?
Well, then it'd be a breach of the agreement with us.
I have a word question on the development agreement, I was thinking that's great. So Creek Ridge has been approved for how many years, like 6 years or so, right? Longer?
Yeah, when was it,
Yeah.
2013?
7 years, right? And, seemed like even Rose Crest is longer than that, so it locks them in
More than that,
old
so-
ordinances, right?
The current code of ethics.
So, can we legally make provisions in our development agreements that say after X number of years, they then have to comply with the new city ordinances? Because I think about like Rosecrest, and it's like, that was before even our new parking ordinance were in place. And so now we bring in 2020, we're back to, 2010 parking ordinances, and we've already decided that those are not good for our city. So I'm wondering if in our development agreements, we can put a clause in there, because then we don't have 40,000 units in the southwest area waiting to be built. I know that's economic and it's building people,
But still, to
construction
your
things.
point, those standards and things change and
Yeah,
change for a reason.
they've changed dramatically sometimes, and it says in there they have to comply with the state code, if there's safety, things like that, I understand. But if we make changes in our city code, I don't think it's to put a big burden on developers. I think it's simply because that is what's best for the build out of our community, and where we notice, oh, this is an issue we overlooked that, we've got to change our ordinances. Could we put some sort of a clause that after X number of years, if you're not built out, then you have to roll in and comply with the new city ordinances?
Yes, you can.
Would you guys be amenable to that?
That's
Because
something we brought up years ago.
Yeah, I think it depends on the time frame, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's not necessarily fair to a developer who's in the process of actively developing, suddenly have to switch on the fly, it's a big deal, right?
They have to agree to it, it's something that's
But yeah,
reasonable.
but there's
It's been
something-
more than 10 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
A lot changes. in
Sure.
10 years.
yeah, we have just.
It'd have to be in
There's a
the-
magic,
it'd
there's a
have to be
number in there, right?
NDA.
Yeah. But
There'd have to be
It just-
language in the
It
NDA.
just makes sense to me that we put some sort of provision in there that says after X number of years, and I agree, it should be reasonable for everyone. But then it just incentivizes them to get their development done in a reasonable, in the timeframe that it was thought about, right? And it doesn't just mean that in 20 years down the road, you can still be locked into,
30 years.
one unit per acre. I mean, one parking stall per home, or, you know what I mean? Because it creates big problems in our
That's
city.
a very good point.
So
I think we need to have a discussion more about that. Yeah.
In this one, you've added this provision that says changes to the city, changes by the city to its planning principles and design standards such as architectural and design requirements, setbacks or similar items, so long as it's basically citywide, then they have to comply with it.
Okay, good.
But if you wanna be more specific, we can put it in there and see what the developer says.
Yeah. I just would like to see something like that, because I don't think, like I said, we make these ordinances just on the fly to make it difficult. I think it's because I feel like it's in the best interest of this build out of the city to do those things.
Not to scroll too far, but I was driving past some of the stuff down in Mountain View the other day. I was like, it'd be nice to be able to update the elevations or design
Yeah,
guidelines as well as
exactly.
time changes.
And I think it's actually in the best interest of the developer at that point too, because we've decided that creates a better product, and if they have a better product, it works better for the whole community. And them, I think makes it more sellable for them.
But we're talking about it for a reason. So.
Right. That's a good point, Sherry, I like that idea. I'd like to vet that out a little bit, right?
They will construct and get reimbursed for the south half of 13800 South. This is the only impact fee road that will be going in since Sentinel Ridge is already built.
They're gonna build the whole road, we're gonna reimburse the south half of the road.
Yes.
Okay. Wanna make sure they're not just gonna build the south half of the road.
Is there a bridge over the canal?
That's a great question. You're building a bridge over the canal? Okay. Looking at that.
We needed a pro.
Yes,
That bridge is important.
build the road.
For you, Alan?
No bridge.
That road every day.
This is the parks and the trails, so we are working with, the Parks Department on what exactly the amenities will be in this larger park. The applicant, it is a large enough park that impact fees will pay for it.
Be clear on it.
Yeah.
Cause it is being used for retention, or is it detention, I can't remember which, but
It's detention.
it's detention, that there's a requirement for the landscaping sprinkler system, anything improvements like
Right.
playground or gazebos, that's what the city.
Yes.
City will read out.
So they're required to pay for the sod.
Need our-
Landscape, basic
Yeah.
landscaping amenities above and
Outside
beyond
that,
that.
if we decide what a restroom or whatever, then.
Well, where does that hit on the priority list, Wendy? Because there's a lot of park space out there that we don't have a lot of money for, so I wanna know, I just wanna set the public's expectation, cause I got blown back on the White Barn. And so it's like if we're gonna say, oh, this is gonna be this beautiful park, we put that out there and the public expects it, and then all of a sudden it's 20 years down the road.
I think it's Wendy's lane, but I would say that from my perspective, if I can get some fields use out of this, put a restroom on it, that's a higher value and more useful than a White Barn. Just-
This park in Teton will be the highest priorities for us in the next few years,
Good.
depending on how development goes and.
That's some good use to it.
It does say again, they will not be reimbursed for land, like you said, land, the sod, the irrigation. So that's part of their detention requirement, so. Again, a lot of words that Steve apparently read twice, but this says that they will, prior to starting, the first thing they're gonna do is dedicate or give us an easement for the storm drain, all the way up the eastern side of the project. They will put the pipe in, they will be reimbursed for the, I don't wanna say this wrong, reimbursed for the pipe, but not the property. And they will,
Reimbursed through
So you're
impact
saying
fees.
Through impact fees.
Herriman will own the property.
It's all right.
Herriman will own the property, they will dedicate it to the city, they will put the pipe in, and then, the trail will go in, and they will, the homeowners association will actually maintain the trail, the right of way.
It will be just that lush.
You know, that's right down, so.
Well, wait, let me clarify this,
Take
because
that
the
before,
pipe
right?
is gonna go through Riverton, we're not
Yes.
gonna own the property of Riverton.
Correct,
No.
We'll
correct.
have an
We'll have an easement in Riverton.
Okay, just wanna make sure.
So they will have an easement in Riverton, they're not allowed to use the portion in Riverton towards their open space. They are allowed to use the portion in Herriman towards their open space, since it will be a trail and open space.
Now,
Yes. That's the agreement right now, yes.
Unless the HOA gets involved, and then we just maintain it anyway.
Yeah.
Are we sure that doesn't go to Riverton?
The piece in Riverton will be an easement. And we will,
Our peak in Herriman, it doesn't go to Riverton.
well, yeah, the piece in Herriman comes to us, the piece in Riverton is an easement. I'm trying to read through it, hold on, trying to read.
The HOA dissolved.
I think this piece, let's see. Oh yeah, we're not responsible for the trail or any of that in Riverton. But I assume, but we're responsible for the pipe in Riverton, right, cause it's our pipe.
That's for the that'll be the easement.
Yeah.
It's actually showing right in that second to the last bullet point that it's an easement to Herriman City as well.
Yeah. So that's the storm drain. The park strips, this just shows what they will install and have their homeowners or their HOA maintain. So they will maintain all of the, park strips and landscaping along the slip road. You know, the double, basically all the landscaping on both sides of the slip roads.
The way we have this for its parks.
So, Because we're kind of looking at things through local scape and things like that also, even though it's not our current ordinance. I would like to see some language in this MDA that provides for that provision for local scape.
Local scape, I like that.
Follow,
like
yeah,
it's
local
happening.
state policies as per Jordan Valley.
What we should probably do is just say, because right now they would be under our current landscape ordinance, but we should just probably make that an exception, like,
Yeah,
if we adopt a new landscaping standard, then they'd have to comply with that
yeah.
at that time. Okay.
Although, I just, devil's advocate, would we want two different landscaping types along a major boulevard, like these slip roads, like half of it's landscaped one way and the other half of it's landscaped another way? That
Because
seems-
they do the first and with our old ordinance and then
Yeah.
our new
Yeah, I just think there should be,
standard.
yeah, we gotta figure out some language around that.
As
so that-
far as Sentinel and the slip roads, I think, yeah, we probably are gonna want it to be consistent all the way down that road.
Yeah, I mean, but the way you landscape the park strips and the resident, the single family's home might be different than you landscape the townhouses 6 years later on the other side of the road,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's
Yeah.
different than Sentinel Boulevard, right?
I just think that we should do everything we can
Yeah.
as a city to
Mhm.
find the local standard for it.
I agree.
And I think the Builders Association are buying into that also.
Again, exceptions, so they're vested again under the current laws and ordinances, these are the exceptions. Like we said, there, any new engineering standards, state law. My personal favorite is procedures, so we don't have to have two different sets of procedures, based on when they come in, they'll have to follow whatever the new subdivision standard, procedure is at the time. Amendments, so right now the way this is written, any modifications of underground infrastructure, pipes, I guess just pipes basically, whether it be water line or storm drain, can be approved by the administrator, by staff basically.
That's what we see, you gotta upsize or downsize.
Right, or a slight change in location of the pipe.
Yeah.
Unless the administrator determines that it's too big of a change, and they can push it up.
That's-
Any changes to the design guidelines would go to the planning commission and would require.
Administrator is community development director, which is Mike. So I guess that out of review, or does it make sense?
Please don't bring 3-foot
Pipe changes?
changes
We
to
won't.
this meeting.
Any-
Holy cow.
Yeah, when you start building, it might be moved 5 or 4 feet, and that just makes sense.
I will point out that this says underground infrastructure for a reason. Some of you will know what that reason is. If you don't, then you don't. But it specifically is for underground. If they're trying to move the alignment of major roads on above ground, then I think that would be a change that you may want to see. Again, all the major roads are basically built, so I don't anticipate that being an issue. Any changes to the design guidelines, setbacks, building elevations, that kind of stuff would just go to the planning commission. Any other changes would come to the council as a formal amendment to the MDA. So again, changes in density or changing uses, major changes like that would come back to you. But we want just for the planning commission to be able to make, slight tweaks to things if they need to. And that's it. Again, these are your options. You can do with it what you will, but I would suggest that all 6 of these items would need to have a decision at the same time. So if you're gonna continue one, I assume you're gonna wanna
Brenda,
continue
did
all
you
of them.
talk about planning commission's recommendation?
I didn't, do you want me to?
I do, because
Okay.
we need to.
I talked to the planning commission, I've actually twice, I've shown the planning commission the new plan, the one that's in your packet. And just said, based on the change with the school district, I just showed it to them in their work meeting, just said, here's what's gonna be coming before the council. They said, thank you, that looks great, we don't need to see it again. Please, we don't wanna see it again. So, just in case you were curious if they wanted to see it, they said, nope, that looks fine. They said basically if the school district isn't participating, they agreed the commercial no longer made sense, they said, we're good. So they didn't, none of them jumped up and down and said, no, we really think we should see this again, so. Just so you know, that was their thought. And again, legally, there's no requirement to send it back to the planning commission, but you certainly could if you wanted to get some input from them, so.
So there's something about this too that I think is, a really important part of the changes here, is that the proposal that's in our packet doesn't contemplate the existence of commercial, and that is a big departure from what the planning commission recommended. That's a big departure from our general plan. I mean, that's a huge seismic shift in planning ideas here. I had asked Alan a long time ago to consider what the implications of that might be financially. If the city loses commercial, what does that do to our budgets and revenue plans, our service expenses on an ongoing basis? You know, is this a net cost for the city and net gain for the city over time? And if there aren't any objections, I'd really like to have Alan just present that information, just so the public can look at that too, because I think it has a very substantial bearing on whether or not this is actually something we would consider approving.
I was hoping that would be part of this time, because I haven't had a chance to see it.
Well,
Floor's yours, Alan.
first of all,
Make some magic happen.
I hope that in doing this, I don't express frustration as well, because since December of 1978, I've been a professional CPA. Okay? Everyone younger than Brett wasn't even born then.
He said that first, he led with that, because now it puts him in protected class.
Most of the last month, virtually every day, I've had a staff member walk into me and say that a councilman was, or this councilman or that councilman or someone else was challenging my numbers. No one came to me directly, so presenting this is a little frustrating. Most of that time, I've been the first one in the office and the last one to leave, so I was available if someone wants to ask me questions. So it's a little frustrating.
To add to
Anticipating.
your frustration,
Okay.
Alan asked me if I could come in and see him, and then I told him, no, I couldn't. There was no spare time with everything going on.
Okay.
I spent all last week north of here, and I have not had a chance to look at it.
Okay, now, here's some of the things I've been hearing, and I wanna air them first. Why is Mountain Ridge going to be a positive cash flow and Adeline was not? Okay? First of all, Adeline was. 13 versions I did, and every one of them is positive. Okay? Not a single one negative. Mountain Ridge is not quite as net revenue positive as Adeline was. It's positive, but it's not as much positive as Adeline. Okay? As we went through the Adeline project, and keep in mind, I'm always asked to do these projections before plans are completed.
Sure.
I did 13 versions of Adeline. Not a single one was negative revenue to the city. There was a plan floated at that same time called Madeline. And Madeline was all 1 acre lots. That was negative. And then it changed from Adeline and Madeline to Teton Ranch. And Teton Ranch is the one that the council approved and is the only plan that is negative other than the Madeline project, in my calculation. I've used the same assumptions in both projects. One of the things that's very important to think about in Mountain Ridge is that almost a third of the streets are going to be maintained by the homeowners association, which makes a big difference.
How big?
What's that?
How big?
Well, I'd have to go and calculate the difference, because I didn't calculate it with us maintaining them, because the proposal's for them too. So that's how we get all the versions right there, okay? Now, the last version I did of Adeline was a request by Councilman Henderson to essentially evaluate that very thing, okay? It was in an email I got from him. When I sent this to Councilman Henderson, I also sent it to Jackie to send to the rest of the council.
Was this in 2018 or?
This is on August 17th, 2017. And in this version, I was asked to look at what Adeline would be revenue and expense if we did HOA roads, if we did non-HOA roads, and if we did the Madeline development. And this is, as far as I can tell, the last version I did of this project before it changed to Madeline, or to Teton Ranch. And you'll see with the, I don't have it up there, but in the, and I've actually got this written, I'm gonna give it to each one of you, but with the homeowners association doing the roads, my projection on Adeline was that we would receive $323,000 a year in net revenue. If the city maintained all the roads in that development, it would be a net revenue positive of $192,000 to the city. So both versions are positive. And essentially when we did the Teton Ranch and we reduced the density, it became negative. Now the Madeline project, which was all 1 acre lots, would have been a net loss in revenue of over $8,000, so fairly break even. Okay?
Alan, I'd like you to repeat something, because I want to, the reason I'm asking you to repeat it is, when I was first presented this information a couple weeks ago, and again, the numbers have changed, moved a little bit, but I was surprised. My assumptions were different than what you had presented. And you just said this again, which I think is important for people to hear, because this is something that's going to be a big issue, is Teton became negative because they lowered the density?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Now, I would just tell you this, okay?
HOA and non-HOA.
If we are going,
Well, so that's what I'm trying to figure out.
the density.
Is it because of the HOA, because of the density, because, I mean, that's,
Both.
those are big
Because
differences.
It's a combination.
Per person.
Okay.
And let me just say, if you were gonna make every decision on a development based on finances, I would tell you, get every piece of commercial you could get, and then make everything else as high density with homeowners association roads. Okay? So, you can't base your decisions totally on finance, okay? Because the decision would not be what this council has said they want. So keep that in mind as we look at finances.
But the first thing you said was to do what? The very first thing you said we should do.
We should get every bit of commercial we could,
Every bit of commercial.
okay? I should say every bit of retail. I would say don't get any commercial that's not retail.
And how do you, what type of retail?
Kind of pay sales tax.
But he also just said that you shouldn't base your decisions on
No.
this criteria.
Yeah. Well, because
This is extremes on
If
both
it's
ends.
just, if it's
Right.
just.
This is extremes on
Okay,
both
just
ends.
finance.
And nothing in the middle.
this is one thing to look at, because, you know, of course, if you got a super Walmart or Costco, that's better quality retail than getting a McDonald's, okay? It just is. But if you just put office buildings in, you're not gonna come out anywhere close to what you do with residential.
Right.
And particularly if it's high density residential, it's not even
Yeah.
close.
A whole bunch of people who flipping on their lights all day long
Right.
on a stacked house.
Well, you know, yeah, it's not where I wanna live, but. you
But
know,
that's how you get revenue.
But that's how you get
Exactly.
revenue,
It's not
okay?
property tax.
Right now,
The others.
we make way more money in sales tax and in DNC road funds because of population than we get from anything that happens in the city. It's not even close, okay? This particular year, we're gonna get about $1 million from sales that are happening in Herriman City, and almost 5 from what's happening outside of the city, okay? Because of population. So when you look at the calculation, you know, you see that population drives our revenue more than anything else, okay? For instance, you know, if you take franchise tax, Franchise tax is a tax on electric, natural gas, cable TV, and telephone. That, franchise tax grows at double the rate of our property taxes, okay? We're growing, so that's all pretty well related to our population. So, you know, when we're looking at revenue generation, next to retail sales, population is our greatest driver of revenue, okay? For what that's worth. But, so, just wanted to, can you flip this over to my computer, Jonathan?
No, he's on the edge.
Back.
It's the back one.
Okay, this is what I was talking about, the last calculation I did of Adeline. Okay, first column is with HOA roads, next one is without, and then there's Madeline. Okay, and you'll see here our net revenue with the red highlighting net reduction. And that is our, and I can't put a heading on this because this is a PDF we're looking at, because it was attached to the email. But this is showing that we with density, generate some positive cash flow. Now, about the time, it's a little bit after this particular spreadsheet, I was given the assignment to look at a whole bunch of options. Okay, we're looking at Adeline with HOA roads, Adeline with non-HOA roads, Madeline, which is the 1 acres. If we did a subdivision, so 1/4 acre lots with no open space, PUD open space, PUD 1/4 acres with open space, and then a PUD with medium density, you can see the differences in the revenue, and you can see that in this particular scenario, the only one that didn't come out positive was the 1 acre lots. Now this was when we were in the transition from Adeline to whether we're gonna do Teton Ranches. Was there another option that could come into play?
And Douglas threatened lots
Right.
if we didn't do it.
Okay. And see here with their original Adeline development, it would have generated $28 million. And it varies from there down as you lose density. So, you know, you look at your one, or your, these were our most dense. I don't think I put on here the, let's see, the one on the left is 1,591 units. The second one the same. Madeline is 226 units. Subdivision with 1/4 acre lots without open space was 798. PUD 1/4 acre lots was 594, and the PUD medium density lots was 1,007.
Remind me the PUD is that HOA?
Well, yeah,
Is that
the
difference?
PUD, Bryn could probably answer that better, but the PUD is the one that we require open space to be designated. If it's a regular subdivision, there's no requirement.
Other than programmable open space in the backyard.
Okay. So, then with that, I looked at Mountain Ridge, and we have, this is backwards because I got the one-time money at the beginning.
Okay.
This is exactly the way it was approved at the planning commission for, so I don't know which.
This is 546 units and 14 acres of commercial.
Right, the 14 unit, yeah, 546 units. Okay, and so, in this calculation, there was no design for what the commercial would entail. So I estimated what commercial would be in this design. Because I'm not sure if the commercial was in the piece that the planning commission approved or not, but I don't have a plan for it, so there is a, estimate of what that would be. As you look at it, now, if you look at the top piece, we have down that far, is building permits and so forth, so about $4.1 million is building permits and plan review and electrical and all the fees. Those are things that we can use for operating the city. They are not restricted in any way. So roughly $6 million of it is impact fees and are restricted. Okay, that means we can't use them for anything except what's in our capital facilities fund. You'll see here the bottom item is $157,000 of public safety impact fees. That is new, that didn't exist when we did the Adeline, Madeline, Teton Ranch. So that will change the calculations and the fact that we've got that. Okay, now in this one, I've calculated the ongoing expenses two ways. If we have in the first column there, residential plus non-retail commercial, it would generate $706,000 of revenue. Now, if it had retail commercial, it would generate $1,052,000 of revenue. Now, we've gone through the expenses in several different ways. First of all, I looked at parks, and I've gone through historical records going back 12 years. What it costs us on average per resident for a park. So we've applied the per resident fee for the parks. We've also gone through with engineering and our records, and we again go back 12 years. We've determined that it costs us 5.5 cents per square foot per year to maintain roads. And then it costs us another 2.5% to do snow plowing. So that's what we've done here. Now on the storm drain here, as you saw in the presentation, this is actually supposed to be maintained by the homeowners association. However, Jonathan gave me an amount of what he thought it would be to maintain the stormwater if we were to do it, okay? So that's the amount we've got there. We also look at all of our indirect costs, and this would be all the costs of the city that would be like finance, administration, communications, HR, recorder's office, all of our non-operating things, engineering to a degree, GIS. We look at those, and we've looked at them on 12 years to see a per capita rate of what that costs, and that's what I've applied for indirect costs. So as you look at it from the plan that was approved at the Planning Commission, it's 95,000 positive. I would say that, you know, I would realistically say this is kind of break-even point, because it could go up or down. These are estimates, but it's estimates based on a lot of history. But if we look at the other one, and you'll see that the biggest difference is right here in this line, and this is the sales tax for direct sales. And you see that there's a lot of difference when you've got retail commercial. You know, you lose a lot of your revenue if you go strictly commercial. So if we have the 14 acres in commercial, it is or in retail commercial, I'm showing that we would have a net positive of about 441,000. Now, again, you make the point of what kind of retail. I'm strictly using in this calculation the 21,000, whatever, that a Better City study said our estimate or our average per acre was. So that's using a 21,000 something per acre for 14 acres. So that's what that calculation comes to. I was also asked to look at what happens if we, it all went residential, and this particular one looks at, I didn't change my heading here, because I kind of changed this on the fly, but this would add, and this is my estimate of what it would be, 54 townhomes into that 14 acres. Whether that's a real number or not, it was the estimate that I got as we talked with our staff. And you'll see that changing from the commercial to the all residential, our upfront one-time money is about $500,000 more than if we have the commercial. Now again, that's based on my estimate of the commercial, because I don't know what exactly would be planned there versus, and I'm estimating what would happen in the residences as well.
Right, and I don't mean to interrupt you,
Okay.
but the second half is annual top taking content, right?
So you see that the police impact fees, for instance, go up $100,000 under this plan.
So it's not plus 500,000 plus 5 million?
Yeah, plus
Right.
5 million.
Okay.
We were just over 10 million when we had the 14 acres of commercial. Without that, the one-time money is higher.
And internally, we've got a conversation, we look at the difference on the revenue ACC brings in to that on officers.
Yeah, it
What the
does.
actual impact might be in that area.
And I didn't point this out on the other one, but you see the second line of the revenue there. This is our HCC property taxes. And this, again, was not involved when we did the other one, but this one would generate about $334,000 a year towards the police department.
And then do we have a cost just within that?
Well, I asked them about that. They did not believe this development would add to their costs, so.
The service for that area would be very minimal. We already have officers over there. That buys us several officers, but also the more HOA we have, the less service we have. Not our roads, but we're still there going criminal events, but.
What should those
apples, we should have.
titles be, right above where you are right now?
Yeah,
Those
I
column
could do
headers,
that.
what would those be? I'm a little confused.
The what?
Those column,
Yeah, this
what should those really say? Cause I'm confused with those.
Well, this one is the only one that counts on this one. This one
Okay.
is away, so.
And that should just say residential only, is that right?
Yeah, it should just say residential. And I can plug a police number in here. It would take me some research, and I've got 1 year of history, so I can't give you as good.
You can't do 12?
All of the others, we've
It'll
gone
give you
back
easier
12, 13 years on most of them. And some of these numbers too, you go back 10 years from now, and we didn't have a separate street department. It was combined with other things, so some of them have a little bit shorter history than some of the rest. But still, even with all residential, again, we're roughly $100,000, so it would be kind of break even. It could go up or down. So that's where my numbers are. And I can get, from what we've done in the last year, what our police cost, and we can add that number in there.
So this week, we get upfront money, 5 million, but on the other side, if we had commercial
If you had
commercial
retail,
retail,
you would make
we
more.
get 400,000 a year.
300,000 more.
300,000 a year, so, that's 15 years of a lower amount of revenue annually to make up for what we get on the front end, so, that's the decision you guys would have to
Yeah.
make. So-
And I guess,
There's a long-term impact beyond that 15 years
Yeah.
for, again,
But 15 years, you've got as much upfront as it'll cost you annually, and that's it. Throwing anything out 15 years, you're just shooting in the air. But,
yeah, and I guess the other thing too, though, is that it's not just about numbers too, because if you have a steady stream of retail or commercial in that area, you're providing services
No.
for the residents that you have there too. I know we talked about,
Yeah.
well, if this is the case, why don't you just dump every townhome and
Yeah.
condo and apartment unit in the world, just dump them all in Herriman, cause that's where you make all the money, but it's
Yeah,
like,
you
it
know,
doesn't create a balance.
it doesn't create a balance, you know, and keep in mind that I'm looking at this development specifically,
Right.
not how it affects anything around it or anything. This is specifically what we know about this development. You know, I don't have time to do the greater study, I guarantee you, you know.
No, this helps.
Yeah, okay, that's what I got.
That's a really good analysis, thank you.
To me, that's the biggest point is balance community, right? Make a decision in a vacuum, even from a commercial point of view, a retail commercial, how many times we've tried to get restaurants here and they say they need what? They need a daytime
Oh,
population.
that's right,
They need office buildings.
You're right.
Which don't produce,
Right? So it's, and that goes back to our conversation about that. No, there's not about moving when, it's about the whole plan and work together.
Yeah, that's why it's so many of these things look really pretty and fair, but you can't plan in a bubble, you have to say, how do they impact the whole community?
We would need a greater study for that.
Yeah, I definitely don't think we should be taxing.
No.
We're done with that item, I'd like to excuse. My
You are
baseball,
excused.
my baseball team plays in St. George at 7:30 in the morning.
Drive safe.
Oh, he's pretty excited.
Don't shake hands with them, you don't have team. Keep your gloves on.
We just do knuckles.
Our term I got canceled.
Thanks,
Awesome. Thank you. Alright, we good to move on?
You're about 3 minutes.
27.
I make a motion to adjourn our work meeting to go into our regular city council meeting.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Got it, thank you.
I think I was supposed to wait for you to ask my motion.
Mayor will call you from in there.
I wouldn't have known that I was supposed to ask.
Okay? Okay.